I'm going to show you two games, and I want you to guess how many years have passed between each of their releases. Here's the first. And here is the second. Keep whatever guess you have in mind as I show you this second set of games. Same deal, guess how many years between each of them. Game number 1. And game number 2. Seven years passed between the 2018 release of Red Dead Redemption 2 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Both gorgeous games in their own right, each of them genuinely shocking the industry on their launch, but for different reasons. RDR2 was so astonishing when it launched for the environmental variety, the graphical fidelity, and the sheer scale of it all. And also, with time, a lot of well-deserved appreciation has surfaced for its narrative, but mainly the characters. Fast forward 7 years, and KCD2 doesn't look all that much better than RDR2 all those years before it, but it still managed to make a name for itself with the absurd amount of interweaving gameplay systems and the depth of its mechanics. 7 years is the same time frame between Ocarina of Time's 1998 launch and the PS2 version of Shadow of the Colossus hitting the market in 2005. But unlike the more modern example I showed, there's a significant jump in graphical fidelity between titles. You see, modern games don't have the benefit that some of the older generation of games had of being able to tout significantly better looking games than the previous generations. So, KCD2 had to differentiate itself in the current market with a strict adherence to realism and immersion. We've hit a stalling point where they keep telling us these games look better with all kinds of quadruple A technology enhancing the amount of pixels per penis pump, but I just don't buy it. At most, they look marginally better at the cost of a $4,000 PC. Games now have to be mechanically or narratively interesting because looking good is just a foregone conclusion compared to a time when just making your game a spectacle could sell a more billion copies. Now, does that still happen? Absolutely, and it's still just as fun, but it's far from a sure bet, and the difference between generations of consoles and hardware are no longer so drastic that you could mop the floor with sales by being a launch title. My point to all of this is to say that Shadow of the Colossus absolutely could have just made itself a game about big-ass, Colossuses? Colossi? Colossi? That could have been where they stopped, though, but the team behind Shadow of the Colossus made a game about massive, visually impressive beasts, and then they said, what if it was also more than that? My name is Not Absolutely Sure, and this is not a review about playing Shadow of the Colossus for the first time in my life in 2025. Better late than never. One of the more difficult things about going back and playing older titles you haven't played before and don't have nostalgia for is that for a lot of them, the magic just might not be there. Truth is, I'm not 12 anymore. I'm not as easily impressed. I'm a 26-year-old jaded video essayist, which is as annoying as it sounds. With that in mind, it should be all the more validating as a stamp of approval that after riding across the opening field for the first time and getting a mini tutorial on climbing, it was impressive to me for a number of reasons, seeing just how fucking big that first Colossus is. Not all of the 16 Colossi in the game are as large as this one, but I think it was very important that they opened with something that towers over our protagonist as much as this one does. it gets the message across. You are nothing, and you have to kill as many of this thing and its friends as need be, and they're all just as menacing as this one. Except it's not that menacing, really. That's something I clued onto pretty early on, that most of the Colossi aren't particularly aggressive to you until you start poking their eyeballs out, and I mean, who wouldn't be mad at that? It only took a couple of kills for me to start wondering if we were the bad guy, and by the time the last Colossus falls, you certainly feel like one. I got a bit ahead of myself though, because beyond the game urging us to do so by only giving us weapons as tools, there is an underlying reason we're killing these things. But that's the kind of thing I would point you in the direction of other video essayists for, if you really want an answer. Especially regarding the meaning of certain things, explanations of the end of the game and the like. I actually quite enjoy researching for videos, but for some games, especially ones with vague suggestions of plot like this one, it can be nice to just wonder. I know it's hard to do now, particularly when Googling and finding a Reddit thread with thousands of upvotes explaining every detail is easier than ever before. But that's the one thing I made sure not to do to myself with Shadow of the Colossus. I went in genuinely blind. The only thing I knew was that you kill big stuff, and that's about as much information as a kid would have had after seeing the trailer in 2005. If I really wanted to hazard guesses about the how and why of certain things, I could. But it's nice for me, at least, to just let it be a mystery. There's this kid, his mostly dead girlfriend, and he's got to kill all the big bastards to bring her back. That's all I need, but that's also where there is more out there for you if you feel like looking for it. You can go as deep as you like, look into all of the unused assets that have been data mined by now, I'm sure, and learn all of the lore that isn't directly spelled out for you, or not. When the end happens, I was just spitballing out loud to my stream that it might be the start of Ico and that this was actually a prequel or something, and I was super wrong. But schoolyard rumors like that and the Mew under the truck in Pokemon only started because people were allowed to just think instead of being insta-corrected by a terminally online commenter. Free will is kinda awesome like that. Coming up on that first boss for the first time though, it's funny how quick I went from, wow, so cool, to what happens if I shoot it? The answer is that it gets, understandably, a bit upset. But it also was my introduction to the jankiness of the controls. This is one of those situations where I really do want to revisit this game with the Blue Point remaster at some point, if it ever comes to PC, to see if the controls are more responsive. It felt to me almost like the floaty voice acting in the original Silent Hill 2, where, intentional or not, it does add to the atmosphere of the game. In Shadow of the Colossus, at least the PS2 version I was playing, everything you do is floaty and unsteady, not to mention trying to control aggro. Spoiler warning, by the way, because despite this being a very old game, I didn't know what was going to happen when I played. But the next sentence out of my mouth is going to spoil things, so get up and pause really fast if you want to avoid spoilers. I gave them an extra second. Now, I'm not going to say that I clapped when aggro died, but I definitely wasn't nearly as upset as I was supposed to be, that the bumper car of a horse wasn't going to be a mechanic I interacted with anymore at the end of the game. I did feel pretty terrible after the fact, though, because, I mean, come on, why'd you have to make the damn horse limp so far? No one likes seeing animals in pain, even if the animal is a selfless, heroic, powerful thing that can't drive for shit. I do wonder if that changes in the remake or not, though. Was it a fully intended mechanic or one of those twists of fate that align perfectly with what you're making? However it got into the game, the reality of playing Shadow of the Colossus is kinda like sitting on a chair that's always tilted a little bit forward. You are constantly slipping off slowly, and you have to play chicken with each Colossus to see if you can zero them out before having to scooch back up on the chair and regain stamina. Mechanically speaking, one of my favorite parts of the game was just how much wiggle room you can make for yourself if you played more risky. Holding on to each of the beasts costs stamina, which you also use to damage them by holding up your sword and then plunging it into any of these glowing weak points, which, by the way, thank you to the devs for not making me stab any of the big boys in the taint. I would have felt worse than I already did about killing them. No one wants death by taint. Stop talking about taints. This is going to get you demonetized again. So, Mechanics. It's always extremely enjoyable for me when games with relatively simple gameplay concepts have a lot of room for optimizations and risks that actually reward you for taking them. The obvious risk you take when letting go and just crouch walking your way across the moving Leviathan is that it might do a barrel roll to get you off the second that you unlatch, and it's a long way to the ground. But if you time it right or you position yourself right, you can let go and stand around in the right spot to get stamina back and then return to being the worst acupuncturist ever. It's the little optimizations allowed to you that make it feel rewarding to try these things out. That's the general gameplay loop you follow though. Climb the beast, stab the beast, move on to the next one. Another very impressive part of this for me is just how confident the team was in their game design, so much so that beyond showing you what the buttons do at the start of the game, they just kind of let you go. It's a very hands-off experience for the most part, only ever interjecting if you get stuck. There was only 2 of the 16 bosses that I truly got stuck on, and for one of those 2 I had the right idea, I just screwed up the execution, and figured I had tried the wrong thing, which is a really impressive record, and a testament to how well they designed each boss to teach you and reward your experimentation when you consider that I am an imbecile. I will say, despite it being a flaw, I found it funny every single time I beat a Colossus and passed out just to wake up at the World Hub for the customary statue explosion of victory. Without fail, I always forgot to turn the volume down every single time, and the explosion is like bass boosted or something because it's so much louder than everything else that happens in the game. It's hilarious. Listen to this. The bosses themselves are the highlight for obvious reasons, but there's a lot of little things that go into characterizing each of them that makes them all more memorable. The lizard you have to knock off from the side of an arena onto its back to hurt. The poor water monster that you have to hit the teeth of to guide it into crashing face first into pillars. The turtle you have to flip on its back with the water geysers. The poor boar that's so afraid of fire that you can back it up off a cliff out of fear. It has been about 2 months since I sat down to play the game versus now recording this video, and all of these bosses still stick out in my mind. And they really make you feel like a piece of shit for killing these things, and rightly so. 2 of the big highlights for me were the 2 flying bosses. Something about the music and the way they conveyed speed with Wander dangling off like a necktie flapping in the wind was just fantastic, which is a great point to bring up. Beyond the skibbity explosion shit being way too loud, the sound design, but more specifically the soundtrack to this game, is phenomenal. Good music and sound design gets taken for granted way too often, and while I'm far from the first person to say Shadow of the Colossus has amazing noises all up in my ear holes, it's worth saying anyways. Now, moving to the endgame, I enjoyed the run-up to the final boss much more than actually scaling him, because at least you can see him nuking you from outer space, but some of the jumps were just kind of wonky on this last one. And not from the controls, but more so the game deciding to give Wander butterfingers on the literal last jump I had to make. My disappointment was immeasurable and my day was ruined, but not as ruined as my brain cells after the ending. Oh boy, let's talk about this. So, quick recap. This is us. We are Wander, and that's our dead girlfriend. Mysterious Voice wants us to kill the Colossus bros. Every time we do, we pass out and wake up back here with a little more of these shadow people hovering around us. We murder these innocent colossi, and after crossing the entire map, Horse fucking dies, and it all comes down to an absolute monolith of a creature that shoots laser beams from heaven to smite you. With all 16 down, the Mysterious Voice has to own up to its promise to save our girlfriend, and it all comes to a head when the village elder and some village guards come to retrieve or stop us from releasing something. Whatever we came here to do, we did with the knowledge that it was against our village rules. Our respawn at Mother Base isn't very clean this go round, and Wander is very clearly being overwhelmed by the spirits that have been collecting around him. The guards shoot and stab him, he gets up somehow, and uh-oh, the Mysterious Voice that promised to revive our girlfriend was actually a demon. Who would have guessed? Turns out the Colossi were actually guardians holding back this doorman guy from escaping, so we were slowly freeing him, and in one of the most annoying sequences in the whole game, you play as Doorman. but it doesn't tell you any of the controls and it doesn't let you actually hit the village people. Maybe I just suck and couldn't do it, but it sure felt like it wasn't allowing me to. They escape up the tower, and the Elder throws the sword we stole back down into the pool at the bottom, which sucks Dorman up like a vacuum cleaner. The bridge out of the valley breaks, and our girlfriend wakes up, and our shithead horse limps in, which makes me feel like a piece of trash for not feeling worse about them falling earlier. Sorry, aggro. In the bottom of the pool where Dorman got sucked up is a baby. It's a baby version of us, with horns. Our girlfriend picks us up and climbs to the top of the tower with aggro, cut off from society forever, but finding a tranquil garden with plant and animal life. An eagle flies away and fade out. So what the fuck? I am satisfied with the ending because it doesn't leave much on the table. You know what happens. It has room for interpretation, but it's not being vague. But so our girlfriend is going to what? Raise us? Her boyfriend, that's now a baby, to be an adult again, and I don't even want to think about what's going on there. But it's got to suck really bad to wake up from being dead, find yourself cut off from society completely, and find your boyfriend is now a baby, and you just have to be a mother all of a sudden. But at the same time, I appreciate that in its own weird way, the game leaves you with maybe not the happiest ending, but at least an upbeat one. Especially after having to murder a bunch of innocent Colossi. The Elder pointing everything out about Wander really recontextualizes the whole game too, because it turns the events of the game from something noble into something selfish. Bro almost let loose an ancient demon and killed a bunch of innocent creatures just for a gamble that the demon might revive his girlfriend. It's a crazy story premise, but at least it's trying something. Too many stories, particularly in video games, chicken out of making characters do morally gray or even straight up bad things. So I can definitely appreciate us being undeniably the asshole of the situation. That kind of summarizes my thoughts on the game as a whole, actually. It's trying something. There are definite frustrations with it in terms of controls and actually finding the bosses with the weird sword GPS mechanic. But the sword GPS mechanic is also unique. The game allows you to learn for yourself. It pushes the scale of everything way beyond what the PS2 had really seen up to that point. I mean, Shadow of the Colossus came out the same year as the first God of War, so talk about a year full of spectacle games. It really feels like Team Ico had a vision, and the game that came out the other side of that vision was uncompromised, quirks and all. I play a lot of older games that feel completely outdated, graphically rough, ancient game design. They might be held up by the trends of their era, and on the list of games that still stand the test of time without question, I have two. The original Doom, and now Shadow of the Colossus. Aesthetically, thematically, it's unique. And with almost 20 years having passed since it first came out, the fact that it still feels unique all this time later is a testament to the quality on display here. It's more than a fancy tech demo. It's more than the sum of its parts. It's a work of art. Thanks for watching.